Konnichiwa.
All right, let's dive into these sources you brought together. We're looking at this really huge transformation in Japanese history today.
Definitely.
You've got this stack of material articles, notes all zeroing in on, well, how the samurai went from being, individual warriors serving lords.
Right, just serving.
To becoming this dominant military class that really shaped Japan for centuries.
Yeah, it's a massive shift.
So our mission here is to unpack all this, pull out the key insights, and really get a handle on how this historical change happened. It's a story full of conflict, politics,
and a whole new social order being born. It's fascinating stuff, really, how power dynamics can flip like that. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. What do the sources tell us about Japan before the samurai really solidified their power? What was it like, say, back in the 12th century?
Well, the picture your sources paint is one of pretty serious feudal fragmentation.
Fragmented how?
I mean, characterized by intense wars between different groups, constant jockeying for power among the big feudal lords across Japan. You didn't really have a strong central government keeping things in check.
So fractured, competitive, sounds pretty unstable.
Exactly. And that instability, that kind of chaos, it was actually crucial. By the 12th century, it had created just the right conditions for these warrior groups, the ones who'd become the samurai, to start grabbing local power.
And moving beyond just serving individual lords.
Precisely. To start forming themselves into a distinct, powerful military estate.
Okay, in this whole period of struggle, it seems like it builds up to something major. One source calls it the final stage of these wars.
It really does. The mid-12th century, that brings us right to the critical conflict, the Genpei War.
The Genpei War.
Yeah. Basically a huge, decisive showdown between two major clans. The Taira, sometimes called the Hei clan, and the Minamoto, or the Gen clan.
Okay. Okay, Genpei War. Makes sense. So what was driving this conflict? What were they fighting over, according to the sources?
At its core, it seems the Minamoto really wanted the rich lands the Taira controlled.
Land grab, then?
Partly, but there was more to it. The sources mention the Minamoto felt the Taira had sort of usurped power, specifically power that belonged traditionally to the emperor.
Ah, okay. So it's land, wealth, and a challenge to the existing authority, even if that authority was already weak.
Exactly, a potent mix.
So how did these two clans stack up against each other, militarily speaking? Were there big differences?
Oh, yeah. Significant differences. And this is where the Minamoto seem to have had a real edge.
How so?
Your sources point out the Minamoto held lands up in the northeast, and their samurai army, it's described as being, well, more capable and larger.
More capable? Why?
The key factor seems to be their constant fighting with the Ainu tribes in that northern region.
So they were already battle-hardened from fighting someone else entirely.
Exactly. That constant warfare toughened them up. And maybe even more important, strategically speaking, the Minamoto could do something the Taira couldn't. They could actually give out lands they took from the Ainu to new samurai recruits.
A built-in reward system.
A powerful incentive, right. It let them grow their forces in a way the Taira just couldn't match.
So a bigger, more experienced army, plus a way to keep recruiting. Sounds like a winning combination.
It absolutely was. The sources are clear. Minamoto's military experience and sheer numbers led to their victory. And the knockout blow, the decisive moment, that was the naval battle of Dan-nora in 1185.
Dan-nora, 1185, the turning point. So what happened immediately after the Minamoto won? Politically, I mean.
Well, naturally, the Minamoto clan ended up in the dominant spot, but here's where things get really interesting, the speed of the change.
How fast?
Within just 7 years, think about that, 7 years by 1192, the clan managed to basically take all the real political and economic power away from the old aristocracy and even the emperor.
All of it?
Yeah.
Wow, that's not just a shift, that's a complete restructuring. Who was leading this?
That would be Minamoto Yoritomo. He was the head of the clan, the victor. And in 1192, he gets the title of Shogun.
Shogun. The title we pretty much automatically link with samurai rule now.
Exactly. And Yoritomo makes a very calculated move. He doesn't set up shop in the old imperial capital.
Better then.
He moves his base to Kamakura, and there he establishes a whole new regime. The Shogunate. Your sources explicitly call it a military dictatorship, a bakufu.
Bakufu.
And this bakufu formally transfer all the real power, political, economic, straight to the samurai class.
So if the samurai now have all the actual power through this shogunate, what happened to the emperor? and the old aristocracy, they didn't just disappear, did they?
No, and this is a really fascinating point the sources bring up about how these power shifts work sometimes. They definitely lost their grip on actual power, the politics and the money, but they stayed, formally anyway, right at the top of the social structure. The emperor was still the ceremonial ruler.
Why keep him then?
Primarily because of his divine lineage descended from the sun goddess, Amaterasu. That gave the whole system a kind of necessary legitimacy, you see.
Ah, okay. Symbolic power.
Very much so. And the aristocracy also kept their high status based on, nobility, reputation, the shogun. Even though he held all the practical power, he was sort of positioned as like a vice emperor, governing for the emperor, officially.
That's an incredible setup. This sort of dual structure. The old simples are there, but the real authority is completely somewhere else.
Right.
So how did this new reality under the shogunate affect the samurai themselves? Did their own structure change?
Oh, fundamentally. It elevated them massively. They became a privileged class, basically on par with the aristocracy they just sidelined politically. They were the new rulers.
The ruling class.
But then this is important. They weren't just one big happy family. The shogunate era actually formalized some pretty significant class divisions within the samurai ranks.
Divisions among the samurai. How did that work? What were the lines?
Your sources lay out a clear hierarchy. Right at the very top, you had the special class. These were the really big feudal princes, the daimyō, owning huge amounts of land.
Big players.
Right. Then below them, you had the middle and lower classes of samurai. And the difference there was mainly about income and wealth. These guys formed the main fighting force for those big lords.
Okay, so wealth and land is one way to divide them. Was there another split?
Yes, and a really crucial one that came about after the shogunate got going. It was based on who they served directly.
Who they served.
Exactly. This split the samurai into two main groups, the Gokunin and the Higakinen.
Gokunin. Let's start there. Who were they?
The Gokunin were like the absolute core, the heart of the samurai class under the shogunate. They were direct vassals of the shogun himself.
Directly loyal to the shogun.
Yes. And the shogunate looked after them, protected their interests, gave them positions, ranks. In return, their duties were serious. Serve in the military when called, pay tribute.
And
crucially, they were the leaders within the shogun's own army.
Okay, so the shogun's inner circle, his power base. What about the other group, the Higokinen?
Right, the Higokinen. These were generally smaller feudal lords, but the key thing is they were not shogun vassals.
Who did they serve then?
They served other traditional powers, maybe the emperor directly or some of the powerful Buddhist temples. The sources mention they sometimes got land parcels.
Yeah.
And interestingly, often farmed it themselves, which might suggest, a slightly different lifestyle compared to the top-tier samurai.
So it wasn't just about rank, but who you owed allegiance to. Feels like the shogunate was deliberately creating this loyal elite, the Gokunin, tied directly to them.
Oh, absolutely. It was a key part of locking down their control. And they took steps to make this power structure official, legally speaking.
How so?
Well, your sources mentioned there was a challenge. The imperial court tried to take back power at one point.
Didn't work out for them, I'm guessing.
Not at all. And the shogunate's response was pretty decisive. They issued the Jōei Shikimoku Code in 1232.
Jōei Shikimoku. Okay, a legal code? What was its significance?
Its main goal was clearly to strengthen and legitimize samurai power. It wasn't just general laws. It was specifically a set of rules reinforcing the shogun's authority. And very importantly, it codified the relationships, the duties, the customs among the samurai themselves. It laid out the legal basis for their privileged position as the ruling class.
So it really cemented everything in place legally and socially. Okay, before we move on, just quickly, the name samurai itself, the sources touch on this. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. The name itself kind of reflects their original job description. If you look at the etymology from Old Japanese, the word samurai basically means to serve a high-ranking person, or to protect the master, to serve the master.
So service and loyalty are right there in the name.
Pretty much baked in. And apparently the original Chinese character used ji, referred to people guarding Buddhist temples. Again, that protective service role. There's also that other word, bushi, which is maybe more straightforward.
Bushi.
Yeah, it just means warrior or fighter.
So samurai maybe emphasizes the service, the loyalty, while bushi is more about the fighting skill, kind of two sides of the same coin.
That seems to be the nuance your sources are pointing towards, yeah.
Okay, so we've traced their rise from this chaotic backdrop through the Genpei War, the setting up of the shogunate, the structuring of the samurai class itself, and even codifying their power. The sources look ahead briefly. What's the final thought on their development after this period we focused on?
Well, they indicate that the samurai estate didn't just stop evolving then. It continued to develop, change quite a bit over the next few centuries.
So it wasn't finished yet.
Right. The sources suggest it wasn't really considered finally formed until much later, specifically when the Tokugawa clan came to power, which was way off in the 17th century.
Yep.
But this period we've discussed, the Genpei War, the founding of the Kamakura shogunate that laid the absolutely crucial foundation, that's when the samurai became the undeniable ruling force, politically and economically.
Got it. So this is really the birth moment for that long era of samurai dominance.
Precisely the critical starting point.
Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive then. Looking back at your sources, we've seen Japan go from this fragmented landscape of warring lords
Total chaos, really.
to a situation where the Minamoto victory in the Genpei War leads to something revolutionary, the Kamakura shogunate in 1192.
And this wasn't just swapping one ruler for another.
No, it was fundamental, a complete transfer of real political and economic power into the hands of this warrior class, the samurai, taking it away from the old aristocracy and the emperor.
And in doing that, the samurai themselves get elevated to this privileged ruling status, though, as you pointed out, they were internally divided by wealth, by land, and critically by loyalty, with those gokunin directly serving the shogun forming the core. And their power gets locked in further with legal codes like the Joi Shikimoku, really defining their place.
So this whole period essentially forged scattered warriors into this powerful, structured military estate that would dominate Japan for centuries. Hopefully, you listening now have a much clearer picture of this pivotal transition and how the samurai rose to power.
Yeah, and as you think about this huge shift, maybe consider that really unique power dynamic your sources highlighted.
Which was?
The fact that the samurai, through the shogunate, held all the actual levers of power, political, economic, but the emperor. He remained the formal head of state, almost sacred because of that divine ancestry.
Right, the real power versus the symbolic power.
Exactly. So what does that enduring split tell you about the complex nature of power, tradition, and legitimacy in this brand new samurai-led era?